The Adventure Mindset by Eden Grace. I would like to tell you a story about a lonely man who needed good friends. He also happens to be my dad. It's a sunny day in Singapore, and a funny-looking man named Brandon was enjoying his kopi si siu dai. Kopi's kind of gross. Let's give him an iced Milo dinosaur instead. Let me tell you about this weird American man's story. In 2008, Brandon arrived in Singapore to start a new career. He looked around with lots of excitement. He didn't know how long he would stay in this foreign land, but he thought it was only a few years. Little did he know, other things awaited him. As the months wore on, Brandon got more and more uncomfortable. It was a very different culture from America. Brandon was very alone. He tried to hug people, but they wouldn't want to hug some stranger on the street. That's weird. Poor Brandon wasn't able to get out of bed. He texted his Singaporean friend, Joe, and said, "Dear Joe, I'm not getting out of bed this morning. I'm depressed because I'm a sad man." And that's when Joe said, "Come meet me right now." Brandon met Joe at East Coast Park. Joe understood what Brandon was going through and gave him some good advice.
What is really important is to look at things from a bigger perspective, to switch on and to put on an adventure cap and to look at the possibility that's outside of where you're at right now.
Joe said you should embrace Singapore and explore all of it. Soon, Brandon was running everywhere. Brandon was on top of the world. He was trying out all the foods from all the inclusive cultures in Singapore, including my favorite, chicken rice. Can we just pause for a second and really show some love for chicken rice? Soon Brandon felt like he was starting to belong in Singapore. He made lots of friends and they celebrated together. Eventually, Brandon met a very pretty princess who he was very fond of. Brandon knew at this point his plans of staying in Singapore for a few years will grow much longer. Would Brandon stay in Singapore for the princess? I hope so. Eventually, he plucked up the courage to meet the princess's father to ask him if he could date his daughter. He was scared that he wouldn't be accepted into a Singaporean family. To his surprise, the princess's father said, "Sure, you could date my daughter. The choice is hers." Brandon eventually proposed to the princess and she said yes. So Brandon married his princess in a beautiful garden, kind of like the Garden of Eden. Oh, I should also mention, Brandon had a beautiful little daughter in 2014. Isn't she the cutest? Yep, that's me. Just when everyone was really happy, tragedy struck. His father-in-law got very sick. One day he spoke to Brandon. He said, "It's a privilege to love and it's a privilege to be loved." Those powerful words still live on his epitaph. Brandon was very sad, but those words still lived on in him. Brandon was given his father-in-law's jacket by his mother-in-law. She told him, "Here's the jacket. You can carry the father spirit." Brandon loved it and was so happy. Then she said, "Now get back to work." And now Brandon was sad because he had to go back to work. Brandon started his own media business called Miles and More. He would work on many stories of local people in Singapore. He started to see what holds Singapore together. It's great people. Somehow, that adventure mindset that he learned so long ago gave birth to many precious memories. And he wanted to help others to have the same warm experience that he had. Brandon also takes his daughter to volunteer with him. I want to give back and help others who need it, just like my parents. Singapore gives me a place to play with kids from all different backgrounds. We all belong here and we all have fun together. Brandon decided to embrace Singapore, and in turn, Singapore embraced him too. So one of my favorite things to do is give my dad a big hug and make sure he doesn't feel lonely anymore. Can we go get chicken rice now, please?
Sure.
I'm so glad that my dad decided to stay in Singapore because it allowed him to meet my mom and for us to be a family and have adventures together. Singapore is our home. And so, that's the story of